Welcome everyone. My name is Ashley Klein-Jimenez and I am from Prevent Connect, and I'm happy to welcome you to our Raliance Powered by Prevent Connect web conference today titled Sport is Part of the Solution to Ending Sexual Violence and Domestic Violence, launching Raliance's Sport and Prevention Center. Prevent Connect is a national project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault and is sponsored by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views and information provided in Prevent Connect do not necessarily represent the official views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. I'm really excited to introduce you all to our guest today and our presenter. We're really lucky to be joined by my colleague who likely doesn't really need an introduction, but in case you don't know him, I'd like to introduce you all to David Lee. David, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here joining you. I'm here in Albany, New York today, where actually with Rebecca Milliman from who you had talked about the web conference featuring her work engaging girls in sports. So I've been speaking at a conference, and so really glad to see so many people from around the country interested in looking at how sport can be part of the solution. So I think I'm going to take it from here. Thank you, Ashley. And thanks everyone in the audience, and it's great to see so many people. And I am going to be wearing my hat today as part of Raliance. And I do want to acknowledge some people that have done some very important work in this. Lindsay McDaniel-Mapp from Raliance, who has recently moved to a new position with the, has done a lot of the work to be able to put together this project, and so I really want to acknowledge the work that she's done. I also want to thank our colleagues at the Center for Gender Equity and Health. I see we have Jennifer Yore on over at the University of California, San Diego. They were very important partners, and also our other Raliance partners. And I see many people who are representing other Raliance partners that are connected either through the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, that are on the call today, and for all of their work. And we're really excited to be able to share this with everyone. So thank you all. So let me talk about what Raliance is. Raliance is a new national partnership, and we have a bold vision. The vision of Raliance is being a large national center that's going to be able to end sexual violence in one generation. And I know that sounds bold, and it sounds like it's ambitious, but it's important that we have a vision about where we're moving forward. Raliance was started with seed funding from the National Football League. We just recently secured our second corporate sponsor from Uber, and we are really excited as we are being able to do work around messaging, around policy work, and our prevention efforts. I'll be sharing most of around our prevention work today, and that this is, as I say, a partnership from 3 national organizations: Prevent Connect, California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and the National Alliance to End the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. And so we do have an office in Washington, D.C., and are really proud to introduce the work here today. In Raliance, we really see sport plays a critical role as both an avenue and a platform in preventing sexual and domestic violence. And what I mean by that is that sport can be an avenue, a place where we can do prevention work and being able to reach out to those who are engaged in sport. And sport can be an important platform for making social change because of the importance and the prominence that sport plays. And so we believe strong in this as part of what Raliance does. Raliance also recognizes that sports culture is uniquely positioned to set norms and standards that can create conditions in which sexual violence is not accepted and does not occur. And we really want to be able to frame this so it's a very positive that we see sport as part of the solution and playing an important part in creating that solution to ending sexual violence in one generation. So let's start with a text chat question, Ashley. Let's ask the audience to share with us, why is sport important for sexual and domestic violence prevention? So I'd like to get it from our audience. What are some of your thoughts of why sport is important for sexual and domestic violence prevention? So go ahead and please write into the text chat. And this is something that has been very important for Reliance that we believe that can do. But I want to get a sense from you and the work that you're doing in your communities about why sport is important. And so leaders create social change. Sport is full of leaders. Sport influences society, society influences sport, and culture change needs both. And that sport provides confidence, and that teams and their coaches can foster a culture of secrecy and power and control, but then we also can transform that to becoming into different ways of moving forward. Sports creates teams, mentors leadership. A lot of our children are involved at a very young age, that we can be role models for youth. That we have the challenge of locker room culture often feeds rape culture, so then that raises the challenge for us of how do we create culture to work against that, because also sport provides a chance for leadership. And that often athletes have a lot of social capital, and that there are huge gender stereotypes in sport, an excellent platform to make those changes. Often we see aggression supported, that coaches can be role models for their students, and specifically for smaller universities, that student athletes make a huge percentage of the student body, and they're an important subset. So I see two themes that are going on. One is recognizing that sport is a place that can actually exacerbate the problem and be the transmission of the problem of the culture that fosters sexual violence and domestic violence. And on the other hand, we see sports as having these incredible opportunities and values that can be able to make a difference. So I think we're living with both of those together, and what we're trying to do with the sport package is to address those problematic elements that might perpetuate the issue, but more important is that we see sport has the opportunity to make a huge difference in being able to go to prevent sexual violence. So why sport? So this is a picture of me from a few years ago when I had more hair and my child, and I had the opportunity of being when my child was young, of being the soccer coach. And I also was a baseball coach. I will admit I am not much of an athlete myself, and did not have great skills on how to play soccer or baseball, but had saw sport as an important place that was going to mold children, that taught them real important values, and that I as a coach wanted to be able to help make sure that happened. As a child, I had many coaches that did not do that, and that it was winning at all cost, and was traumatic for me as a young child, and so I wanted to make sure my child had a different experience. And that we see that sport, there's a tremendous reach. Millions and millions of children and youth and adults participate in sports, whether it is youth sports, whether it is high school sports, college sports, and while there's much fewer in professional sports and other elite sports, we see a wide number of people that are participating, and it's a tremendous opportunity to be able to reach a lot of people and that power. And for me, I know as a coach, it was a very important place in my life that I felt I had to be involved. And so, and I couldn't resist. It's an awesome picture, so I couldn't resist putting it into today's presentation. Sport is also important because of its role in youth development. And I have here a picture of the legendary I grew up in Los Angeles, California, so many of us throughout the country and those of us in Los Angeles were aware of the legendary UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden. And this quote here, "A coach must never forget that he is a leader and not merely a person with authority, and that coaches can play an amazing, important role of being able to help shape young children and athletes of all ages, and plays an important role, and that we can see that this, when done in a way that's really productive, can be really consistent with the values and the ways that we're trying to move forward in doing our sexual and domestic violence prevention efforts." And the other part of sport is to recognize the social influence, and we could have a long conversation, but sport has been a very important force in our country of looking what goes on. On the left, you see, once again, my LA-ness is coming through as I'm giving examples, but we have the LA Dodger, Jackie Robinson, and as a first African American who played Major League sports and bringing integration, that this is an important part that led many sectors and institutions in our country of being able to define how we can be able to look at social justice issues, and in that case, racial integration, and as we can move forward. And the other example was sort of inspired by the recent movie Battle of the Sexes of Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs with the Battle of the Sexes in the 1970s tennis match, but we see the power of women's sports and the empowerment of women, and now sports played an important place of providing that role within our society. And there's many other examples and ways that we can have that discussion today about the social influence that sports has, and that sports is an important place to be able to make those changes throughout our society. And so that we think is a very important part about why sport is important. So we do, as you had observed earlier in our text chat, sport cultures and environments can contribute to sexual and domestic violence. And they can contribute to the solution in ending sexual and domestic violence. And we have to live with both of these, and what we want to do is be able to claim and be able to look at sport and what it can do to be able to interrupt those contributions and actually be contributing towards that solution of where we're moving forward. So where we're now, as we said, sport cultures and environments can contribute to sexual and domestic violence. Many of you have already talked about the problematic gender socialization that can take place within sports, and the way that manhood could be, for male athletes, can be constructed is about being more powerful than other, you want the power in sports that might be done in ways that are disrespectful of other people. Now we also see in sport and sport systems, unfortunately, many examples of the lack of accountability or minimal response. And we also see that the values of aggression and dominance might be rewarded in sport, and that inequity becomes something that is a key element of that. But in the same way, we also can see that sport cultures can contribute. And so this here is a list from the coaching literature of looking at what coaching can do, and it's how it can increase people's competence, strengthen character, build confidence, build connections, help people develop compassion. It becomes systems of accountability where people can learn self-control and where leadership is modeled and given opportunities to move forward. And as I look at this list from the coaching literature, and I look at the list of protective factors that are associated with being able to prevent perpetration of sexual violence, I see a great congruence. And so we really want to make sure that we can capture these values and these elements of sports and have that be able to spread and become the dominant messages that can, so we're not seeing the perpetration of the problems, but really being able to build, strengthen how sport can make a difference. So we really do see sport as a powerful part of the solution in ending domestic violence, that sport is an important connected system and actually set of systems. And part of, as we have done our research, what we have done is been able to look at the different connected systems around sports, from the wide range of youth sports through the high school systems and of sport to the college systems, all the way to the pro and elite programs. And that sport becomes a crucial influencer, and then, as I talked about earlier, there are inherent protective factors associated, and sport could provide very powerful role models. And what we're trying to do is build on those strengths. And what we're working toward is a place where values and norms and behaviors are taught and reinforced throughout the sport pipeline to cultivate and support healthy individuals, teams, and communities. And if those values, norms, and behaviors are taught and reinforced and are part of the system, we see that sport culture will make an important contribution to ending sexual violence. Now, we started this project actually looking at sexual violence, but as we learned more by studying with sport, we saw that it was really necessary that sport looked at both sexual violence and domestic violence from a prevention perspective. And so our prevention efforts, we know, are going to be addressing both sexual and domestic violence, and that it's important to do that. So that's why we are talking about, while Reliance's focus is on ending sexual violence, we know that at the same time, by increasing those protective factors, we will also have an impact on being able to ending domestic violence too. So with this, in collaboration with the Center of Gender Equity and Health out of the University of California at San Diego, we developed the Sport Plus Prevention Center. And this center, and you do have the URL, I'm going to start giving a tour of that center, is an important place to be able to consolidate the thinking, see what the best resources are available, and be able to then lay the framework and become a foundation where people can be able to get information about sport throughout the country. So I'm really excited that we are unveiling this forward with all of you here. So here is the home page. And I am not going to do a tour. We've been having a little bit of technical difficulty live online, but I will be having this. This is our home page and how from Reliance, our Sport Plus Prevention Center, how sport can end sexual and domestic violence in one generation. And we have many different sections that you can see. And so what I will be doing is highlighting some of the different methods, pieces of this that we encourage people to be part of the solution. Fundamentally, we do want people who are involved in sport to join us and be involved, and so it's important to be able to click on the I am part of the solution and encourage people you know in the sport world to be able to sign up with us so we can be able to communicate with them and provide those resources. There's many different elements that I will be talking about today. You'll get to explore the resources we have available. You'll check out our roadmap that we have developed. We will look at the research that we have conducted, and we also can encourage you to join our learning exchange where we can keep on learning and sharing with each other. And so this is, as I say, the home page of our website. And so I'm going to first talk about our prevention database and what resources exist. As we had done our research and doing the work, in which I'll talk about a little bit later, we identified that there are many programs that have been going on, and programs and efforts and strategies that have been already implemented within sport, but we often don't know about them. I was just at a workshop today where people are asking, what about this for this age level? What about, what are different types of things we can do? So if you click on the Exploring Our Prevention Database, you will then come to our prevention database. And in the prevention database, there's much information that you can be able to learn in being able to how to get involved. So I'm going to go walk through this, and you can explore this in many different ways. So one is you can look at it about who is part of the solution. You can also look at this about what are some of the examples of the solution, and you could also be able to look at how are you going to get involved. And this is a totally searchable database, so you can use our search functions and be able to search to be able to move forward. Now the who is the first place I want to start, and in our research we identified 5 audiences that we want to be able to address. And there are different strategies we'd engage to them. So one of the first strategies is that we need to equip athletes and think about what we can provide for athletes in the issue. We then can be able to mobilize coaches and think about what we can provide for coaches, because there's information that are necessary for athletes, but coaches play a different role. We also want to be involved with families, fans, and communities, because we know that sports takes place. This is we've been less attention put towards the families, fans, and communities, but it is an important part of the sports infrastructure. I know I spend many a time when not coaching, sitting on the sidelines, watching my child playing sports, running in the field, and having that connection, and the parents played an important role in helping set and reinforce the values within the sport. We also need to be able to mobilize administrators, because the administrators who play roles within the different leagues, whether they're youth leagues, whether they're athletic directors at other institutions, at colleges or universities, play an important role, and so we want to be able to have resources for them, and we want to strengthen organizations and leagues themselves as they develop the infrastructure for their work. And so in this, we've looked at and identified these 5 different audiences that we're trying to address. Now, when we talk about who is part of the solution, you have once again, those 5 different pieces, and in there you can be able to explore. So if you wanted to pick, here we gave the example of engaging family, fans, and communities, you can be able to go to the who section, click on which one of those 5 audiences are, and then we actually list programs. We currently have a database of over 100 programs that we have identified, programs or initiatives that are working throughout the sports system, and you can be able to identify them and get additional information about each of these efforts. This is a growing body, so we will also be looking for you to be able to add to these items as we move forward, so we can build that database of understanding what is available out there. We at Raliance decided not to try to create a training program or create some program, but to be able to identify what those programs are and come up with a way that we can understand the issue better and being able to move forward. And so that's part of the who and what we can do. In the what are the solutions, where are the solutions, we have worked on the sport pipeline. And I've defined 4 different categories that we've addressed. There's youth sports, and I will go ahead and circle. So we have our youth sports and resources for those, starting as children as they're young, going through the youth ages. And then there's high school sports, which have a different infrastructure and way of operating. And then we also have college sports. And then finally, we're looking at pro and elite sports and looking at what we can move forward. So once again, if you want to search by where, you can pick by which of those 4 audiences and see what's available within our database. And then there's how to get to solutions and strategies. And as we've done our evaluation, our assessment, we've identified 8 areas of strategies of moving forward. I think this is a really important contribution to the work that we're doing, because a lot of times when we see sport doing something, if they're doing something at all, it's just focusing on one area or one small discrete activity. And what we know, in order to be effective in being able to do prevention efforts, we have to have comprehensive prevention strategies that look at a range of activities. So we have looked at how people can develop and, more importantly, enforce their policies. And having those policies in place that can be enforced is an important element of what we can do, of what sport can do to be able to prevent sexual and domestic violence. It's important to engage in partnership. That we see the most successful efforts are efforts that there is partnerships bringing, in particular, we're interested in seeing the partnership between those who are expertise, who are sport organizations with those that have expertise in the issue of sexual and domestic violence. And building those partnerships becomes a crucial element of where we can move forward. Join communities of practice. And what we mean by a community of practice is a group of people that get to share the lessons learned with each other and get to be able to draw on from each other, and that we know effective ways of being able to address an issue requires being able to talk it through and learn from each other and peers. It's important that coaches talk with other coaches about what they do. It's important that people that are developing policies check in with others that are developing policies. It's important that administrators get a chance to learn from other administrators and how we're doing this work. What Prevent Connect will be doing is identifying what those communities of practice are, and we will be setting up a community of practice by having our series of web conferences and opportunities of sharing among people who are involved in doing sexual and domestic violence prevention in sport, so we can be able to help build and strengthen how the field will be moving together. It's also important, as we know, in creating change to build champions. And champions is an important model where we have people within the sectors who say this is important and champion and push forward for it. It's been so important to see the work that, for example, Joe Torre has played in talking about domestic violence within baseball and sports, saying how important that work can do. We see champions like Joe Ehrman from Coach for America, who's played an important role of being able to be a champion. And as we see coaches and administrators and athletes speak up and speak forward, those champions become necessary to be able to help push forward and provide change. There is also providing resources and basic information. That's another element of what goes on. These sometimes can be information provided to all the different audiences we talked about. Often people give a lot of attention to the educate and train element, where we're educating and training. Most of these, though not all of them, are focused on either the athletes or on the coaches. And that's an important element, and there's some really strong programs that have an evidence base. There are many other programs that are based on really sound principles that look to be very promising, that warrant further research, and that we want to be able to, that becomes an important part, but not the only part of a prevention effort. We also must measure our impact to be able to see what's going on. And that opportunity to do that measurement of what the impact is, doing evaluation of what moves forward, will help us learn what is working, what is not making as much difference. It will lead to being able to do program improvement, and also being able to know which of our interventions should be replicated and continuing. And finally, there's about raising awareness, and that we need to continue to raise awareness about what the issues of sexual and domestic violence are. Of course, we have seen the sport world, through much news stories, have great attention to the issue of sexual and domestic violence within sport. We need to continue this work, but we cannot rest only on that work. And so you are able to actually search by each of those strategies and be able to find out what resources we have available. Actually, I've been talking a lot, and it's a really exciting site, and I know, Ashley, you've really enjoyed going through it. One of the things that's really cool about this is that if you look at it, we actually have broken down how many programs we have, and this is a growing list, and people can add to it, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But you can see where there's a lot of programs. So, for example, we're doing this on a local, state, and national level, and looking at the different 8 strategies, and you can see what type of local programs. So there's a lot of people that provide resources on the local level. We have 18 different examples there, but only 2 about how to measure impact on the local level. And that might give us an idea of helping make some decisions about where to find resources and where we need to work on developing new efforts. So you can go add to a resource if you click on our page, and you go to the add a resource section, which I just circled at the top right-hand corner. You can go ahead and provide information about your program and submit that to us, and then we will review those and be able to then put those and add them to here. So as you say, we have currently over 100. We expect this to grow and having more people to share their prevention resources. Currently, the descriptions are describing who it's for, talking about the age level, talking about what type of category it is, what level it's at, who the audience is. We will, as we move on, we're going to start looking at what type of evaluation's been done and understand more about what the potential impacts are and be able to learn more as we're doing it. Right now, we're starting by just cataloging what is available so we can understand that. And I really believe we've created the strongest collection of materials of what's available. Now we are at a question of the audience. So,
yes.
Yes, so let's, I'd like to hear from our audience. What are the resources or strategies that have been the most successful for you in engaging sport in sexual and domestic violence prevention? That's probably a better way of saying this. So what have you found to be successful? What resources or strategies have been really helpful for you? So I'd love to hear from our audience about what are the types of things that you have used, that you find that have been helpful. I'd like to hear from our audience. I see there's a lot of experience. I recognize many of the names, people.
So it looks like as people are typing in coaching boys into men and athletes as leaders. And Athletes as Leaders was the web conference that was part of the web conference that we did earlier in the summer that I linked to. But David, I see a lot of people are saying coaching boys into men. We have.
I want to note that there is, and actually, if you can put a link, we did a 3-part series. We'll put links to both of those web conferences with Athletes in Action, which is designed for female-identified athletes, and Coaching Boys into Men. We did a 3-part series with Futures Without Violence on how to do that implementation, and so we do have some of those recording. Those are some of the ones. Coaching Boys and Men has a really strong evidence base of some research that's been published. One of the things that Raliance is actually about to do, is we're going to be convening a think tank of researchers and look at trying to identify what the future directions in research should be to be able to address preventing sexual violence in sport. So we think that's a really great opportunity. I see other ones like Live Respect, and people want to get more involved, and so far they've worked with their NFL team on rookie training camp and Be No More Than a Bystander training over in British Columbia, and Safe to Compete is another one, an Unmasking Masculinity presentation. And if any of you want to put links to these, feel free to do that.
And I'm putting a link to the series that we did on Coaching Boys into Men, so folks can find that.
Okay, and Christy McRae is talking about a disclosure response training to athletic trainers and coaches. So it's really important. That's a really great example. Green Dot Bystander is being done over at USF, which is, I assume, University of San Francisco, or is that somewhere else? I could make sure I could be wrong. My Bay Area bias is coming through. Breaking down the silos within higher ed has been essential to those engagements and being able to move forward. And it was University of South Florida. Thank you, Maggie. I should not be so California-centric. And that there's been modified Coaching Boys into Men, looking at all genders for college varsity athletes. It's been well received, and I see some people that have been Green Dot, which is a bystander intervention program. Disclosure trainings and how to respond for employees and students in specific programs. And so Step Up, which is another bystander program that's been designed specifically for athletes. And so this is some of the great examples that people are doing. Now, I notice a lot of these are the trainings for the athletes, and so what we want, and that's why it's great to see some of them that are thinking about some of the work on policy. I've noticed in youth sports, in youth organizations, there's been a lot of work on policy, and as we've seen with national attention, we see it's important that we not just have policies in mind, but they also are enforced and have effective enforcement mechanisms. And so, great. Thank you for everyone sharing some examples. What we'll be doing is drawing from your examples is looking to feature future efforts on Raliance powered by Prevent Connect powered by Raliance web conferences to be able to share more of these and be able to learn lessons from each other around sport as we go into specific efforts. And we're really interested in efforts that are building multiple steps, that are multiple strategies, and doing comprehensive prevention efforts. So with that, let me move on to the roadmap. And so what is the roadmap? Our roadmap, we know there's no single solution to ending sexual and domestic violence, so the roadmap serves as our theory of change for creating specific action steps so the sport community can take in and throughout sport. And so what we've done, so if you click on Explore the Roadmap, you can see, and this is what it looks like online, the different elements that we have. And in that, we've identified the problem that we see of sexual and domestic violence that is taking place, but also our vision. And I shared these earlier today, recognizing the problem, and also our vision that sport makes a contribution towards ending sexual and domestic violence is the vision of what we're going to do. And we know that the problem is how it can be able to perpetuate that. And we understand this as we move forward here. But then, as we look at who can be able to do the work, and so we and how and what those strategies are. And I talked about these already in the different elements. And this is part of our roadmap, is that we have to look at the athletes, coaches, families, fans, and communities, administrators, organizations, and leagues. And we want to be able to find ways to do it. And we talk about how to, for example, here, when highlighting equipping athletes, how to equip athletes. And then we think about the different strategies in specific that can be done for athletes and being able to do that. Then we identify the strategies, and as I said, there were 8 strategies, and then our prevention database collects, as currently there's over 100. This, of course, will be changing and increasing over time. So hopefully, as you will be adding pieces, we will be able to get additional ones that will be coming forward, and that we need to get those strategies are important. And then we've gone through and identified what the outcomes are. This is the outcomes for athletes. And we recognize our outcomes on 3 different levels. And we try to use the sport language in this. And so short term, there's about educating. We want people to be able to participate in trainings and activities for athletes. We want them to know what the expectations are for their character, their respect. We want them to learn about respectful relationships, learn about prevention, and we want to shift the attitudes. But then we want to move to the medium term, because that's just the very beginning. And then we have to practice. And as we use the sports language of playing defense, meaning that when things, and these are sort of the more reactive pieces, that we need to speak out and interrupt what's unhealthy, disrespectful. But we also want to play offense and actually reinforce the values and standards that are upheld that support well-being and respect and gender equitable conduct. And we need to be able to have people take leadership, being mentor and model those values. And what that will do is lead to some of the long-term, or as in the sport world, we would talk about mastering, and that we lead to thriving individuals. We lead to bystanders being active and taking action, that we reinforce positive culture, and that will lead to being able to prevent sexual and domestic violence. We do have a roadmap in a more of a PDF version, and you can download a copy of this here. If you don't want to just look at it online, you can get one easy piece of paper. So we do have that available on the roadmap. And then we talk about the impact. And as we talk about the impact, there's 2 different directions. One's the avenue that we can do within sport, and that's going to be developing healthy people, teams, and communities, that we have lived values that we can work towards ending in sexual and domestic violence. But then we're also looking at sport more than within sport. But it's also going to be a way that sport can make a positive change through society as a whole. And that sport individuals can have that sport culture can change society, and that sport individuals can play positive roles in our society. I look at how many people who are leaders in our communities today who were in the past had their training from sports, as in part from sports, where they learned to be leaders in sports. We see that as an important way of being able to make change, and we want to be able to take advantage of that and capitalize on that. So I'm curious, so Ashley, let's do another question from our audience.
Yeah. So I'm going to put it in the text chat, but it would be great to hear from you all about how you've gotten sport to buy in and be interested in sexual and domestic violence prevention. What magical powers have you used, or what relationships have you built? We'd love to hear from you on that. And David, thanks so much for that tour of the database and the roadmap. It's a lot of information. I did have a chance to click through it all, and I really enjoyed it. But there's just a wealth of information there. So I hope that folks take an opportunity after the web conference to do that. And it looks like folks are starting to respond to our question. So Becca says that really trying to do an outreach strategy of attending sport games and talking with parents about the organization and the work that they are doing. Approaching from the inside, Christy says, through a gatekeeper who will speak highly of the need and work done for sexual violence prevention. Let's see, there's a lot of stuff coming in, which is great. But building relationships, having a connection with the athletic directors, and being able to build those relationships.
Yeah, I think Leslie has an important one. Use coach experience and make it real. Remember, people don't go into coaching in order to prevent sexual and domestic violence. They're going to be doing coaching, but they do go into coaching because they want to make a difference in athletes' lives. And so that's a way of being able to do it. I've seen examples of using walk a mile in her shoes and getting the baseball team to be involved in that, and having a fellow program with varsity athlete teams. And so a lot of this really looks like relationship building and getting the connection and finding the congruence and values and moving forward. Of course, we know that sometimes that participation happens after there's something negative has come forward. And that's an opportunity you want to take advantage of, but we really would prefer to be able to create the opportunities before this, not when situations as responding to them, but being proactive and being able to move forward and being able to do this. And so these are some of the challenges. A former college athlete, as a former college athlete, student athlete, and you get to be in contact with your old sports thing and to building on the relationships you had when you were an athlete, or people who, and then we can get connections of people. So it's often asking, who do you know, where were you involved, what did you do? And we've had many people who have been involved in that sport. Well, I want to move on to the research piece, and this is a piece in particular our colleagues at Center for Gender Equity and Health, and I know Jennifer is on the line, and I don't know if I'm trying to see who else. I know you was looking about getting some of the other colleagues. It might be sitting in the office with you all together. That we did several pieces of the research, and part of it is that we had done a peer-reviewed literature review, and that gave us a lot of information. And then we did what we called an asset mapping exercise, where we did 49 interviews with key stakeholders in the world of sport and those who are doing prevention work to be able to learn what were some of the strengths and some of the gaps and understanding what the issue is. And so we went over and developed this into a report, and so I highly recommend that you are able to go ahead and look at that report. We also do have an executive summary for those who don't want to read the very long report. We can move there. So if you go to the overview report, you can download our report, and it does give some information in moving forward, and we are going to also start listing more publications as time goes on, not just Raliance publications, but other publications that have been available. There's many great resources that people have put together around sport and prevention, and so we want to be able to highlight that in our, in our overview report. I'd say the literature review was a comprehensive review of the peer research literature, understanding about the dynamics about the perpetration and prevention of sexual violence, and the asset mapping were the 49 interviews. Overall, there were several recommendations that came out of this report. One of them was to strengthen connections throughout the sport pipeline. There are some places that we see really good connections between the sport pipeline. For example, when we talk about recruitment from high school to college, there's very clear rules and articulated ways of being able of doing that work. We want to think about how we can strengthen our prevention work through the pipeline, and this can make powerful differences. Imagine if the messaging and the policies and the support that were done from youth sports were carried on through high school sports and then on to college sports. This congruence and strength would then become more of an effective system in making change. The second one was what we call team up. In my world, we would probably call it collaborate, but I think team up is actually a better language, is that we have to find the teams of people that are able to do this work. And that we can't rely only on the sport to do this on their own, or we can't look on people who are domestic violence or sexual violence prevention experts to do this on their own. We have to find ways in collaborating together to make difference. The third part is training champions. You saw that was actually one of our strategies, that it's important there are people within sport world that then say this is important and move forward, and we need to help support those people that they can make a difference. It's very powerful. I was just hearing an example today of a high school where then the principal was piloting the programs and got to the stage saying, now it's time that all coaches are required to do this because we used to just do it on who was volunteering to do it. It made such a difference there. We now want all of them to do it. And that person becomes a champion at their campus to say, this is an important issue. And the final one is that we need to build on the current strategies that are working and that are making a difference in getting involved. And we don't want to start from new. And that we've seen that while many communities this hasn't been taking place, there's many places throughout the country on local level, state levels, or national level where we're seeing some really great effort. That we've seen funding by the National Football League and other sports leagues to help support some of these efforts. We've seen efforts in the NCAA in putting together materials and giving guidance to university programs. We're starting to see youth sports in organizations that have been sharing their policies and procedures and how they can do those issues. We want to build on those strengths and then strengthen them to create comprehensive prevention efforts. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we'd love to know what other big research questions folks have been considering in their work in sexual violence and domestic violence prevention in sport. So I put that in the text chat.
Okay.
And David,
and I just do want to read a comment that from Deb Seltzer from Ohio was talking about that would help people on the local program. And they need to be hearing from national leaders and affiliates to find to help find the prevention programs. They need to hear from those champions that come from the national and state level to help influence the local. And for us, it's actually a two-way street. And we need to have our national leaders being able to speak about what is important, and we need to have our local leaders being able to highlight what they're doing that make a difference that will also then influence what moves on nationally. And that's what we'll be doing in Prevent Connect, is finding ways to bring those national, state, and local voices here to share their experiences, share their examples, and then be able to get a chance to learn with each other from the lessons, to share our lessons learned, and know that while we don't know everything that works, to know what we're learning about, know what our questions are, so we cannot have to reinvent the wheel each time, but draw on the experiences that others move forward. So as I had mentioned, we are working on a think tank and asking researchers, and I even see some who will be participating in that are on the call today. I would love to just get some idea of what are those questions that you would want us to learn more about in prevention. And so that would be a really great place to, so what are things that you want to learn more? One thing that we're really interested in is, there's been very little program evaluation about what's going on of a rigorous nature, and how do we help move programs so they're ready to get to the place so they can be evaluated and move forward. So thinking about what are some of those pieces. So I'd love to just get if there are any questions that you have in the audience here about research that you'd like to see. So, there's an interesting question about thinking about how to have a focus on sport, how a focus on sport may impact students who are not interested or feel negatively about sport. And I think it's a really interesting question because we have to remember that all students are not involved in sport in school settings. All youth aren't involved in sport. Sport does play an important role in often setting some of the values, though not all of the values within a campus. So we do see that sport plays leadership, and we're not suggesting that sport's the only mechanism, but we think it's an important one. And I think that is one, if you're developing a prevention strategy for a school, that you don't want to exclusively look at sport, but can see sport as an element of what you're going to do. There's other types of, so for example, the Green Dot program that many of you have referenced, a lot of the work with Green Dot is not, generally has not been focusing primarily on sport, but finding a wide range of leaders that have great influence within their community and having them learning about how to be able to spread the messaging and strengthen the bystander, people becoming active bystanders on their campuses. And so it's a strategy that looks at finding people of influence in many sectors, not just the sport one. So here's a question. Is sexual harassment really more prevalent in sport than other programs? And if so, what factors contribute to that increase? And so when we're talking about sexual violence here, we are looking at sexual violence on a wide range of activities that ranges from behaviors that are inappropriate but not necessarily illegal, to those that are harassing, to those that become actually abusive, physically abusive, in that full range. And there is some research that suggests in certain athletic settings that there is higher levels of abuse that have been associated with certain sports and certain settings, and that so we maybe want to learn a little bit more about looking at what those risk factors are around different sports and different settings, and more importantly, what are the factors that are protective factors in sport, and what makes a difference to actually creating sports as healthy communities. We spend a lot of time studying risk, and we need to spend much more time studying what we can be able to move for. And then there's also a question about learning about the efficacy of online learning components with athletes, and we've seen an increase of online lunatics. That's really another one. And another point was to be able to look at some unintended consequences and be able to think about this, and that we often see well-intentioned ideas and to make that there's some negative consequences. So being able to evaluate and look for those and be able to anticipate what we're moving forward. That's a really great place. So thank you for those contributions there. So we are getting, I want to be able to talk about the final section briefly and then open it up for questions from the audience and get a chance for here. Our final section is our learning exchange. And it's, as I say, a place where we're going to learn from each other and creating activities. And we will be developing web conferences, we'll be developing podcasts, and we'll be coming up with blogs to be able to share ideas and continue learning and moving forward. And so this is something that is growing. The next thing in our learning exchange will be a recording of this session here. So people who were not able to join us can get a tour of what's moving up. So that will, right now it says sign up for it. That will become watch the recording of the session. And we will be increasing events and ways that we'll be able to learn and share with each other. So I do want to encourage all of you to help spread the word. In the lower right, on each screen, you see a little circle that says, I am part of the solution. We really want you to encourage people from the sports community to say they are part of the solution and join us. If you want to distribute information about this, do contact prevention@reliance.org, and we have a toolkit, a distribution toolkit with a email blast template or a website or newsletter copy or social media posts that you can be done to help spread this within the sports world. So if you want to do that, we can make that. In fact, we'll probably make that available on the website. We haven't done that quite yet. We have sent that to some of the sport leagues, so this is a way to help spread the word. And so we want to encourage people to sign up and get that distribution toolkit that is available, and do contact us at prevention@reliance.org. So I think our final question, Ashley, is, before we go to questions from you, is what else do you want? And I've already seen the request in the text chat, and we really appreciate that. What will help you advance sexual and domestic violence prevention in and throughout sport? Because what we've done is, I really encourage you to go check out, go through our center, see what you can learn, think about who this will be useful for, how you can be able to spread that word, but we also want to know what we can do that can help you on the next steps in moving forward. We are working on building this, and the next steps here is now to be talking with the sport world, seeing what is useful, seeing what more needs to happen, and being able to help strengthen where we move forward. Our goal is this becomes the place for all people in sport to go find information about sexual and domestic violence prevention in sport, and that while that there's many people developing great programs and initiatives, this is a place that we can be able to find them and learn from each other and be able to develop comprehensive strategies. So if there's other things that requests that you have, and what would help you be able to advance the work you're doing, whether you're in sport or working with sport, in doing that work, that would be really helpful for us to be able to hear about. So go ahead and write that in the text chat, and we want to just have you join us to being part of the solution. And so go ahead and really move forward. So I think, Ashley, I'm going to open this up to questions if people want to put some questions or answers. And we did expect this to be a little bit shorter web conference, but I would love to just we have a little bit of time if there's any questions.
Okay. And folks will have an opportunity to respond to what will help advance your prevention work in or through sport, also in the follow-up evaluation survey. So if you need a little more time to think about that, there will be an opportunity. And of course, you can always reach out to us as well.
Okay, well, great. Well, we're looking if there's any questions that have come forward. And so the question about with people that are someone that's new in the field, what's the most important thing an elite level athlete with social presence should be doing now to help the cause of ending sexual and domestic violence? That's always a hard question to say what is the top thing, and I think that's part of, and that's part of one of the challenges of this is that there's multiple things to be doing. And so as we've highlighted, there's different pieces of the strategies that we can be able to move forward. I'd also love to hear from other people on how to do that. So this is one of the things that we can do is talk about the role, particularly for elite athletes, and the complication and both what training they can get, what support their coaches need, what do we need to do with administrators, what are the policy objectives that we want to be able to make sure that support this, how do we create a community of practice, how do we raise awareness among those different 8 elements. And creating a live network we can tap into. There are great people on this webinar, and I'd like to continue conversation with them. Absolutely, and that's our goal, is through our learning exchange to do this. We will be doing web conferences throughout the year, so there'll be a way for you to be able to help connect with people and be able to share and learn from each other. And so that's part of our goal, is to be able to create that opportunity, and that we are exploring ways that people can be able to connect with each other. So that is something that we are working on. Okay, well, Ashley, I think we are getting to that time. I do want to just, Raliance we're really excited with the work with Raliance. You can reach us in many ways, prevention@raliance.org. We are also follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we really encourage doing this work, and we look forward to continuing sharing with you. We think that sport can make an incredible, has and will continue to make an incredible difference. I can just see, looking at the list of people, many of you have done some really exciting work on this in the world of sport already, and so we want to be able to work and advance how we move forward. So I think what we'll do is, Ashley, I think I am here, and maybe it's time to close out today's session.
I agree, David. Thank you so much. It's so great to see this resource being shared, and I just want to thank you for providing all of that information, and for our wonderful audience for joining us today and providing really great questions and feedback. This was recorded, and so hopefully we hope to have it up in the coming days, but you will receive an email from me when that is available to view. So you can share it with folks who may have missed it, or go back through it. All of the materials, including the text chat transcript, will also be available. And you will be receiving an email in the next little bit asking you to complete an evaluation survey, and at the end of that survey there is an opportunity to download a certificate of attendance. So your feedback is really important to us, and we really do read every single evaluation and use that to inform our future programs. So please take a few minutes to do that. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions or need anything, feel free to reach out to me, and I will make sure you get what you need. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and thanks again. This will end or conclude our web conference for today. Take care.